love this book. Yeah, this is a good book. This book to me is about the difference between books and or any kind of 2D media and 3D media or movies. 3D media on TV is so much more scary. Exactly the same content in a book. You can put your hand over it, or turn the page, or get rid of it somehow. You can say, and this is a silly book. This is kind of for the young range because there's a monster at the end of this book. It's very cute about. It's kind of a nice experience to read this book with a kid because you really see what being naughty is good for. It's really pretty healthy at this age. It's sort of daring to go on. It says, whatever you do, don't turn the page. And then the kid, of course, turns the page. So a really fearful kid probably won't, but it's good if they do. And then you get to the end. The next page is the end. There's a monster at the end. I am so scared. Please, please do not turn the page. Please do not. So the kid is monitoring how they handle their fear and apprehension. It's only me. So, you could see that a 4-year-old who's fully armed is not going to be that impressed by that. But if you let them watch the wrestling on television, or worse yet on a big screen, of course all TVs are big screen now, and you have a little 4-year-old guy who's just becoming aware of his own aggression, suddenly quite realistic about how much smaller he is than other men, and this ugly big guy with blood coming out of his fangs and their makeup and everything goes, I'm gonna tear your head off. They die from that. That's just too strong. It's too scary for them, and they can't really handle it. So it's better not to do that, to let them see. I mean, for some reason, people always let their little kids see these movies that live with them for years in nightmares. But if they could only control that, it would be better for the kids. So kids who get too scared develop and can't handle the emotion, it overwhelms them. It's quite common actually for them to become counterphobic, which is a term that's not like an everyday term, but it's really useful for this age, because if you're really, really scared, you go around pretending to be that guy and trying to scare or hurt other kids. So it doesn't really make sense on the surface, but if you just let yourself loosen up a little bit, you can get the idea that fear and aggression are two sides of the same coin, and they're kind of interchangeable. So a lot of moms are reluctant to let the kids take karate lessons, which is of course what they dearly want to do, because it looks like it has some kind of magic that can master the body and the physical fear. You have certain moves and rules, but that kind of playing it out is probably good as long as it's not, larger than life. So what else? Well, they have a lot of new skills. Just if you're going to look at like gross motor, fine motor, and the basic things, the gross motor, they're already pretty good by 3 at everything. They can pivot, they can climb, they learn to skip sometime in there, they can learn to plan real body moves. The bike, I met a little girl last week, a 4-year-old who knew how to ride a 2-wheeler without training wheels. I said, what is going on here? And he said, well, the training wheels broke, so she just rode anyway. That's a record for me personally. I've seen 5-year-olds, athletic 5-year-olds, but that was pretty good. So anyway, they're developing a lot more complex skills and balance and things that you wouldn't expect younger. For the fine motor, think about what you want a 3-year-old to do. Fine motor is you want him to be able to draw a circle and stop after the first one, because the younger kids can't stop, but the 3-year-old or soon after 3 should be able to draw it and stop. It doesn't have to be perfectly round, but there's norms in the Denver of how round it should be. But by 5, you can draw a 10-part man is the screen for an IQ of 100 and a 5-year-old. So it's a dirty little trick, but it works pretty well, and they don't mind drawing a little. And if it's a stick figure or a lump with arms and legs coming out of the head, it's fine. But sort of the maturity and the intelligence has to do with the complexity of the figure. And I just love this. This was a class at Greenhouse, which is a nursery school down by Columbia. And look at how they change from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. That's 5s, but even during that time, their changes are really huge. The geometric figures in the gazelle, they have a good example of that. Some other drawings here. This is a good book. I'll read you a little of that later. So this is the best 5-year-old drawing I have. The mother was psychotic, and the kid was incredible. So most of the figures don't have that many, more than 10 parts, but the complexity and the scenario and the balloons and the jewelry and the hair, I mean, that's a really smart kid. She may not have a happy life, but she's got a very good IQ. So what else? They can, a lot of kids are learning to read now at 5, but they do better if they teach themselves. If they get into the system of the schools, it kind of messes up the idea. So these are teddy bears. These are the 4-year-olds. They had a teddy bear project. So they're really pretty nice and complex. There's one more set of drawings that is so dramatic. What is it? Oh, there it is. These are before and after. I mean, some kids don't change very much, and some kids change unbelievably, and that's neuromaturation that takes place around 4, 5, and 6, that you actually can't drill them very much or teach them very much for. My favorite one is Carson. Pretty good, right? So if you'll notice, he does write his name really very well. He does have that C reversed. But if you think about when children learn right and left on themselves, anybody want to take a guess?
7, 6.
7, 8, and 7, 8. It's really hard. You just ask a series of them when you're seeing them, show me your right hand. And then if they're very sophisticated, they know your right hand, but that's usually 8. So the rule is you learn configuration of the letters and numbers before you learn the orientation. So if you draw a 3 on its side, or a E backwards, or an L lying down, it really doesn't matter. The right, left, and the orientation along the line is a later skill. So a lot of even teachers say, oh, he's putting his letters backwards. I think this is an early sign of dyslexia. Not really. There are some visual spatial things that are typical in certain kinds of dyslexia, but that's not what that is. That's not knowing right from left, which is neurologically normal. The rule is you don't correct either invented spelling or letter orientation until sometime during 2nd grade. The nicest way of teaching, it seems to me, is the invented spelling. First, the kids have something to say. They dictate it. They draw a picture and then they say, this is 3 beans, and the teacher writes it out for them. Or they can start, if they know enough letters and letter sounds, they can write it out, but it's sort of like, what's that kind of shorthand writing? Just some sounds are right and some sounds are not, like grandfather might be GFR. Fine, you don't correct that because they're learning the phonics and the flow and the idea of writing. And then around 2nd grade, you try to tighten up a little bit.
Should I start putting a page in? Start putting a
All right, so does anybody know this poem, Mr. Nobody?
I think so.
Yeah,
Sounds
Mr. Nobody. It's really sweet. And it's a nice representation of me of what it means for a kid in this age range to lie. Parents do get quite bent out of shape that the children are lying, and the kids know it. And actually, they are, and they know it. But reality just doesn't have the ring to them that it has for the rest of us. And if they really, really want something to be true, it's more likely to feel true to them at the time. So the age of reason for children is traditionally around the world, it's 7. The age at which if you know a rule and break a rule, you pay the fine. You have to take the punishment. That's pretty standard. So a kid who's 5 or 6 and says, I didn't take that cookie, somebody came to the door and gave it to me. It's not a good lie. It's not, it's not hard for the parents to see through it. And that seems even more if they're rigid. It's harder for them to even handle it because it's so obvious. The kid knows he made it up, but it doesn't have the quality that lie has. That's not the right word. So I'll just read you a couple lines from Mr. Nobody. I know a funny little man as quiet as a mouse who does the mischief that is done in everybody's house. No one ever sees his face, and yet we all agree that every plate we break was cracked by Mr. Nobody. So he goes on and on. He marks the doors. He damps wood up the fire that kettles cannot boil. His are the feet that brings in mud and all the carpet soil. So anyway, there's a way of thinking about the complex web of truth and dare. Okay. So what are these books about? And when we're talking about fantasy and fearfulness and defense mechanisms and how they don't work as well when you're asleep or on your way to sleep, this topic is probably near and dear to the hearts of all the families that you see with children this age. That's about sleep, right? Babies don't sleep because they're neurologically unprepared. Toddlers don't sleep because people have trouble with limit setting and they don't want to miss anything. 3 to 5-year-olds don't sleep or stay in their rooms because they are sweating bullets in there. They are really afraid. And they're really afraid of, like that first cartoon, what's going to happen when I shut my eyes and relax. So there are a lot of very entertaining books about that help, actually. Bibliotherapy is a thing. Reading stories about your issue. So there used to be a nightmare in my closet. And how are you keeping safe from that nightmare? Yeah. He knows it's a toy gun, and I think he has a cannon also. He knows they're not real, and yet somehow in play or in fantasy, they can work. So if you enter into the magic, there's another cute book that the mother opens up the windows in the bedroom and says, "Go away, bad dreams, everybody out," and then she closes the window tight. And that can work. If you enter into the fantasy, you can get a magic solution. So before going to sleep, I always closed the closet door, as you would. I was even afraid to turn around and look, right, because it was a big monster, couldn't turn the knob. And then he keeps the light on, of course. When I was safe in bed, I peek sometimes. So, I mean, there's a lot of magic if you can't see it. One night I decided to get rid of my nightmare for once and for all. As soon as the room was dark, I heard him creeping toward me. He's got his helmet, he's ready. Quickly, I turned on the light and caught him. Go away, nightmare, or I'll shoot you. It sounds pretty violent so far. I shot him anyway. If it's your kid, don't side with the monster. My nightmare began to cry. You know, kids play very bloodthirsty games, but as they say in that movie Raising Cain, don't treat it as adult violence. Treat it as children pretending stuff. I was mad, but not too mad. Nightmare, be quiet, he'll wake mommy and daddy. He wouldn't stop crying. So we took him by the hand and tucked him into bed. So you see how these stories can turn from murder to nurture and, you know. Wait a minute. I tucked him in bed and closed the closet door. Now, I suppose there's another nightmare in my closet, but my bed is not big enough for another one. So, you know, the very didactic books like Berenstain Bears, here's why you should never litter, and here's why you should never, you know, yell at babies or whatever. I mean, they have their place. They work a little bit, but the fantasy ones are better because they don't have to resolve the problem. They just gives a kid a story to think about it through. You all know this one, which is about Max's own aggressive impulses. Aggressive impulses are not only very clear. 2-year-olds are probably just as aggressive, but when a 4-year-old's aggressive, he's got the language, he's got the props, he's got the way of menacing everybody, so you're more aware of it. But their issue is more about, am I bad or good? They have a lot of morality issues. The good guy, bad guy stuff has to be played out, and this is more about, am I good, am I bad, and how can I handle it? Like they have the Superman. If you're going to have Superman, you have to have Joker. So, because if you're playing it out, you can't resolve any of the good guy, bad guy things that you project from yourself. Really, is what those fights are that they have with the figures. Unless you have both sides, and it's very, very common in this population for the kid to only have a good guy. So that's advice you can give if the kid is not listening or whatever the mother calls it. More play actually really works as opposed to inhibiting the play, which they have a tendency to want to do, and I can see it. They don't want their kid in a gang stabbing people, but it's different when you're 4. Okay, any other thoughts about, oh, what else do they all complain about? All the people who complain about 4-year-olds, one of the things is swearing. They all swear. It's on the chromosome, there's nothing you can do. You know, I argue to get the kid into a school, and then they come a week later and say, I'm taking him out of that school. He's, I don't know what it is about those people who send their kids to that school, but he came home swearing. Of course, the other mothers are saying that about them. So it's shocking to have them start to, but they do it. There's nothing you can do. I knew this guy is 75 or 80 now, and they had a very sheltered life. And one of the brothers at this age called his other brother an old bowel movement. They never heard swearing, but somehow they got the scatologic idea because it's in the brain. There's nothing you can do.
Do you tell them anything to help parents whose kids are swearing? Do you just say ignore it?
Yeah, except that it's a little bit late. That horse is probably out of the barn because the first couple times they did it, everybody laughed. Mm-hmm. And kids don't really know. They really have more scatology than they have sort of sexual expressions for their swearing. Because, fuck, it's not funny to them at all. See, it's funny to older people.
No, I'm just laughing because you're still being recorded.
Oh, shit. But diarrhea is hysterical.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's I'll be able to edit this, don't worry. If he ever lets me have it. So yeah, if you can be prepared for it and not laugh,
Mhm.
it's also a lot better if when you burn yourself taking the pot out of the oven, you don't say shit. That, it doesn't help, but
Yeah.
some you can explain that it's sort of like nose picking or masturbating. It's private, so you don't do it in front of mommy's friends and grandma or at school. It's okay, but it's only for private. You can try that. But minimizing the reaction, it works for everything. Kids love a laugh.
Yeah.
Like everybody.
Sounds like don't we all?
Yes. With the swearing, yes, there you go. Don't be scared now. Okay, I think that it's a lot of what the complaints are and helping people sort of get it about that it's not just aggression, it's fear that makes you show aggression, that it's a little more complicated, and not to be intimidated by it. It's helpful. Okay.
Thanks, Harriet.
Thank you.